So, thank you everyone. My name is Stephan Barthel, as you heard. I don't have much experience in technology, so I'm a little bit of an odd bird here. So that's why there's sort of smaller text on XR technologies. But I do have experience in doing research about urban sustainability. So, did that change? Yeah, right. This is the sort of global challenge that we face. As we heard previously, we're going to build urban landscape is prospected by the UN for another 2.7 billion people on planet Earth. This will take up space equivalent to South Africa or Germany, Spain, and France combined. So these figures are a little bit hard to take in emotionally, but this is the prognosis. 2.7 billion people, new urban landscapes that does not yet exist. Simultaneously, we're trying to stay within the Paris Agreement, 1.5 degrees. This is the scenario planning from Sweden. It was done 2010, and you see a little bit of hack in the curve. That was 2008, the economic crisis. This is how you see how closely knit carbon use is to economic development. How many in this room think that we're going to reach the Paris target? Raise your hand now. It was one. That was actually better than most of the speeches I had. No one reaches their hand. This is why it's very important to focus on resilience building. Resilience is about the social capacity to absorb disturbance and continue to develop. We need to start thinking about how to build urban resilience, not only mitigation. That is very important as well. We cannot stop that. We will probably bend the curve a little bit later. So we need to focus on that as well, but we need also to focus on urban resilience building. So we have invented a concept that we call social ecological urbanism. And the ontology, the worldview, the starting point is that we view urban systems as a living ecosystem, as a living system. What you see in front of you is a leaf of cabbage and the city street network of Greater London. And you can see how the structures evolves very similarly in purely biological products and urban systems. So in the discourse about urban sustainability, there are two competing schools that uses a systems perspective. One is coming mostly from the technical sciences, and that is called socio-technical systems analysis. The other is the one that I have represented for a very long time, which is the socio-ecological systems perspective. Socio-ecological urbanism integrates these two perspectives because that is needed, and I will tell you why pretty soon. So the socio-technical system is about efficiency, but what is efficiency? Accessibility, digitalization, and density. These are core values in this, with this worldview and perspective. Social ecological resilience is, of course, about resilience, focus on human health and well-being, climate adaptation, and focus on the local environment more. So what is resilience, the topic of the speech? Resilience was born in the ecological sciences, 1973, by a person called Buzz Holling. I'm going to guide you through, so when this speech is over, you will understand what resilience is about. Resilience theory aims to understand non-linear dynamics in natural systems, such as the processes by which ecosystems maintain themselves in the face of natural disturbance, for instance, fires, droughts, and floods. In the literature, it has been identified over the years that there are 7 principles that you can use to build resilience in socio-ecological systems. I will also talk a little bit about some of them today. I will start with redundancy. What is redundancy? I will use an example from the coral reef in the Caribbean to prove what this is. Over the years, there was overfishing in this coral sea. The coral reefs are dependent on grazers, like even in terrestrial systems, like cows and sheep, to keep the forest away, to keep the open landscape. The same is true in coral reefs. If you take away the grazers, the system changes and the algae dominates the system. Before the overfishing, there's never many different species of grazers. But due to overfishings, the number of individuals in each species was lowered. The amount of food was still the same. So it was a rapid growth of sea urchins that was not fished because the niche opened up for them. In the end, the sea urchins were completely dominating the system. And what happens when you have too many species in the same place? A disease came and completely wiped out a complete population of sea urchins at the same time that there was a global warming event. This is how this coral looked before, and this is how it looked after. So that system shifted, and it has not shifted back since then. So there are multiple stability domains in chaotic or complex ecosystems. And we think it's the same is with urban systems. So the adaptive cycle, which shows the dynamic of ecosystems over time, if they're healthy, was one of the inventions from Buzz Holling. It starts with the exploitation phase, when you have the bare soil, different species that are specialists in exploiting this kind of environment comes in and dominates the system for starters. After a while, other species that are really good in competing dominate the system. And you reach a climax sort of a state in the system. Here up in the north, we have the forests. But that also means that the system is overconnected and brittle. It can be likened to a city that is overplanned or something. And there's always disturbance on ecosystems. In this case, forest fires. So the more connected, the more sort of same age and species in an ecosystem, the more vulnerable it becomes to disturbance. When a disturbance comes, it hits very big. Remember the forest fires in Sweden last summer. But if you have a landscape that supports reorganization, then the system naturally develops back. And this is a natural cycle of ecosystems. But you need to have the sources of resilience in the system. If you take away the sources, the system develops into a new stability domain. And this is a little bit hard to understand how that works in complex systems. This is the disturbance regime in Canadian forests, where the blue dotted line is a linear increase in forestry and cutting down the forest and replanting the forest. More and more forest becoming dominated by human use. But 1970 was a non-linear response on this linear intervention. The system develops into something completely different. Are there nonlinear responses in urban systems? We are in the midst also on a global economic development. And 70% of the cities in Europe are shrinking in terms of population when the industry is moving somewhere else. We like to look at urban form as one of the slowly changing variables that we can sort of steer and build resilience in urban systems. But there are competing sort of spatial paradigms. One is the compact form, comes mostly from the socio-technical side, and the other is a socio-ecological city that sort of focus on human well-being. So the compact city model, it focuses on post-car, mixed use, energy savings, land sparing. This is much needed. When the cities expand over land, we are losing croplands that are important to feed the population on the planet, and we're losing biodiversity also. These are the two one of the two first global studies that really look at what kind of land is urban development consuming on a planetary scale, both published in PNAS. So it's needed to contain urbanization, not engage in urban sprawl too much. Less area per capita to light up, to heat and cool, and engage in public transport. These are the good sides of the compact city. But what happens if you take away the green infrastructures? This picture is from Istanbul that we've been working quite a lot over the years. It grows with 250,000 people each year. 250,000 each year. That is not unusual in this part of the world. And it grows so fast that the development of infrastructures are not keeping pace, and at the same time they lose the green infrastructure, the green areas, the ecosystems of the city, the nature environments. 9 persons died in this event. And we hear about this from Istanbul, Houston, New Orleans, Mumbai. We're going to hear it a lot more in the future as well. Nature environments regulate the temperature, especially during nighttime when you have heat stress for elderly people. And also, we like to see that you integrate the urban green infrastructure when you do modeling of air flows in the city. I have not yet seen that. But of course, the green infrastructure in the trees are changing wind directions. This is the first maps of ecosystem service in Stockholm, Sweden, where I come from. And see if this works. Doesn't really work. I go. So the green area, this black areas are the green, sort of the forests and the green areas, and the blue is the space that the green areas cools down outside of the green areas. So if you remove a green area close to the city center, it affects also the city center. So in this case, there's been discussions to build on this forest, and that would probably affect larger parts of the inner city in terms of temperature regulation. So these discussions were not there before, but they're there now. Nature experiences and health, the literature on this is exploding. Now we work together with a scientist in Aarhus University, and they just released this amazing study with a complete population of the whole of Denmark, showing that people that live the 10 first years of their childhood in nature environments, that's one of the best medicines to prevent schizophrenia. So there is a link between how the outer environment is looking like and our health. This research goes really, really fast now because the medical bills in the Western countries are spiraling, and only 5% is sort of invested in preventive healthcare. How can we shift the landscape to make people more healthy? You don't really know this too much when you come from a country with lots of green areas and forests. But take that away, see what happens. This is when we see the results. So urban form shapes processes in the city. It shapes social action and well-being, economic activity, and ecological processes of the city. So working with urban form is a key tool to shape urban resilience. So we do this in the Urban Studio in Stockholm. We look how pollination flows go through the city, where the retail has the best opportunity to be placed in order to make a good business, about social segregation. Do I have 1 minute left? 5 minutes, okay. And we also work with this participation tool, PPGIS, Public Participation GIS, to see what kind of areas in Stockholm the people like and dislike in their daily routines. What is quite interesting is that architecture itself is very important. Many sort of reasons for having a bad experience because the architecture is ugly. Other reasons for having a good experience is that it's the nature environments, having close access to nature environments. And of course, there are gender perspectives on this that we have not yet studied, but we will do that. Are men and women experience the city in the same way? Do they like the same kind of places or not? We have produced sort of the first experiential maps of Stockholm. What are the areas where you're most likely to have a good experience and a bad experience in the city? The red colors here, you're most likely to have a bad experience, and the green areas are most likely to have a good experience. And the red dots here is the central parts of the city, which are really bad design in our view, and we have given a lot of criticism to the city planning. They are doing the same as they have always done and making it worse at the moment. They're building more offices where there really are a lot of offices, whereas the people don't like it. There's a lack of participation and listening to the citizens of the city. What is also very interesting that we found that has not been published before is that the ecosystem service of temperature regulation. I show you the map of temperature regulation. That has an impact on people's experience of well-being, even though this is invisible biophysical processes. So how do we navigate this smart city tsunami that we're experiencing now in literature? There's about 10,000 publications on the smart city. Most of them are tech-driven. A very few has a social sustainability focus. So our take on it is, let's use the technology to increase well-being for people living in cities. And you have seen these different sort of sports apps and phones in order sort of capture where people have good and bad feelings in the city and experiences. And also giving back something to the users that using this kind of equipment, so that people learn what kind of environments do I feel good in, what kind of environments do I feel bad in. And feedback also to the planners, how the people experience your interventions. So it becomes tighter feedback loops of information. So on XR technologies, my view sort of as an outsider using this technology, I understand it can be used to envision what is not yet there for people that are not designers, that have this capacity for fantasy. This is from Garden in Berlin, Moritzplatz. I'm sure many of you have been there. It looked very ugly. You can never imagine how that area became. Two persons just took, squatted the land and made it into a fantastic garden in the middle of the city. They have a restaurant there, a cinema, political speeches, concerts. It's one of the most visited areas in this part of Berlin. It did not exist before their interventions. To learn about what kind of sort of spatial elements in the city that can build resilient urban forms. for ecological flows and for human well-being, but also as technologies for moving people around in the city. The left picture is from Norrköping in Sweden. We have 32,000 trees, which provides really good shade for people moving around in the city. How can you use that kind of old designs for building new designs for, let's say, the High Line in New York? But also to envision really blue skies ideas when you build resilience. I think these bridges from India are fantastic. They are built slowly by navigating life, twining together the roots of the tree, so it becomes a bridge. How do we use this kind of technology to create really fantastic, cool, resilient designs for the city? And we were part ourselves in the design of the campus area in Stockholm, Albano campus. We did not use XR at the moment. We used sort of normal prototyping by just drawing figures, but it would have been interesting to see what we could do with the XR. But I want also at the same time just pose a warning. The first sort of law publications on the Google Smart City development in Toronto is coming out now. And there seems to be a complete lack of social sustainability issues in this area. And we're going to hear a lot more about that. No considerations of democracy. Very little considerations or talks or discussion about the privatization of public space. What about control and transparency in the city planning process? How will this be affected when big players like Google and others gain control of the process? Accountability if something goes wrong. Can we blame the technology? It's not our fault, it was the fault of technology. And resilience. How will this smart city digital designs deal with climate change? Things like that we need to start discussing. So what we're trying to do in the University of Gävle, in Urban Studio, we try to sort of bridge these different perspectives of social ecological city and the social technical city in order to find synergies, biosocial technological designs. And we need to pose the question, why are we using this technology? What for? And for whom? And who are the winners and losers? Thank you very much.